Hey everybody, it's Dr. Bill Jensen with the Evolve Wellness Experience. We're back for episode number 3, and today we got a real special surprise for you. So buckle up and get ready for the ride. All right, well, welcome back. We're getting into episode number 3, numero tres, today for you Spanish-speaking people out there. But I got a really, really special thing going on today. Two important reasons this is special. Number one, it's a really dear friend of mine. We go way, way back, over 20 years, as we were just discussing, actually, before we got the recording going here today. So this will be the first time that I've seen or spoke to her in almost 20 years. And number two, she's the very, very first guest we've ever had on the Evolve Wellness Experience. And so I brought her on board today because she is much smarter than I am. And she's going to dive really, really deep into the topic of grounding. And it is such a simple thing that everybody can be doing right now. Has so many different benefits for our health. And she's going to dive into all that stuff to give everybody a little better understanding of all that stuff. So to give you a background of her name is Dr. Christy Garner. She's passionate about finding the simplest tools to make the biggest difference for people to achieve optimal health and happiness. She earned her natural science degree from a college of St. Benedict. Following her passion for holistic medicine, she went to school with me at Northwestern Health Sciences University. Her postdoctorate focus has been in the field of epigenetics and expanding her knowledge base in the areas where individuals have influence over their expression of their genes, namely detoxification, nutrition, and stress adaptation. Over the last decade, she has worked with over 2,400 individuals with highly sensitive nervous systems, including individuals challenged with autism, ADHD, anxiety, hair pulling, skin pricking, OCD, and addiction. She believes that attaining and maintaining vibrant health comes from reconnecting with our innate ability to heal, to each other, and to the limitless healing power of the earth, which we are going to dive into today. So without further ado, Dr. Christy Garner, welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Really a pleasure to be here with you.
So let's give people a little background first of all. So 20 years ago-ish, or maybe a little bit longer than that, I think maybe 1998, 1999. When did you start school?
Yeah, that's right.
So anyways, as you probably would understand, I was in school before Dr. Garner, and all of us were the cool kids. So we decided to let Christy join the cool kids club. And so we became really, really good friends. And then at some point, we all are roommates together. We're going to school together. I'm like obviously a major influence in her life as far as the academic portion of school was concerned. So I know that I definitely got you through those years. And then as it may be, I graduated and some of the other friends of ours graduated and we went our separate ways. I was not going to stay in Minnesota where it was 20 below zero in the wintertime. So I took off and went down to Florida and start my chiropractic career down there. And then as it happens sometimes, we kept in touch, but we kind of lost track of each other. And fast forward 20 years. I'm watching a documentary in my mom's living room on a Sunday afternoon called The Grounded. And so I was keen. I'd heard about this on a podcast, and I said, I'll check that out. So I think it was on Netflix or something, and we're watching it. And all of a sudden, I see Dr. Garner on there, and I'm like, oh, my God, that's Christy. Like that. And then I looked again, and I said, yeah, it is. So I messaged you, and you said, yeah, that was me.
And here we are.
And here we are today. So I was like, wow, what a cool concept after watching the documentary. And so I was like, yeah, let's bring her on board. She kindly agreed to support. And so here you are. And so let's dive in. Grounding. I've seen it termed grounding. I've seen it called earthing. Is there a difference? Are they one and the same? And what is it essentially?
It's all the same. So we're just trying to come up with a name for this really foundational term, which is that our bodies are designed to be connected to the earth. And so you can call it earthing, you can call it grounding. It's all the same. If I was going to really simplify it, I would say that just like our bodies are designed to be in the sun. So when the sun hits our skin, our body knows how to make vitamin D. And so we have that intimate relationship with the sun. What research is showing is we have that same intimate connection with the surface of the earth. And so when we touch the earth, and some people even like to liken it, so like we make vitamin D from the sun, we can even call it vitamin G from the ground. It's kind of like one of those foundational connections that we need to have optimal health. And so when we touch the earth, we can talk more about, how to earth as we go along. But what happens is that the earth is covered with free electrons. It's these negatively charged particles, to make it simple. And when we touch the earth with our bare skin, our body absorbs these negative electrons, and all of those negative electrons have different impacts on our body. But I think what a lot of people are familiar with is the term antioxidant. So if you were going to really simplify things down to, what are things in our body that are challenging to us, toxins, let's say, bacteria, viruses, heavy metals, chemicals, all of these things, they often are positively charged ions. They're pro-oxidants. And the things that are nourishing to our body, just from an electrical perspective, are mostly negatively charged. When we think of fruits, when we think of vegetables, a lot of herbs, all of these things are negatively charged. This is what antioxidant means. It helps to combat the positive charge of these things. So if you can flood your body with negative ions or this negative charge, you get all this benefit of being able to introduce antioxidants to your body. And so, that's where a lot of the research goes down. You see all this amazing research for earthing, and it seems like it does everything. Mm-hmm. But if you understand the science behind what's coming, it's almost like you're plugging your body back into its kind of charging station, as if your body was a battery, and you build up positive charge over time by getting exposed to what you eat, what you breathe, all of these things. When you touch the earth, you immediately absorb all of those negative electrons, and it helps to counterbalance. And it's like your body recharges itself. And that's what a lot of people actually describe the feeling as, is like, it just kind of feels like your body replenishes itself.
That's amazing. It always rings home too, because like in the other podcast, we always talk about the fact that, we called it the Evolved Wellness Experience because, the world is rapidly evolving, and the human body has evolved as well over time, but does not do it so rapidly. And the more when you look into health and wellness, you just really get back to what ancestral living was like, touching the ground, eating fruits and vegetables, being exposed to sun, and just doing a lot of the things that people know they're supposed to do. But unfortunately, in today's society, is not is done as much. We live in concrete jungles. We don't touch the ground. We don't get outside. We eat fruits and vegetables that are bad for us, have pesticides, herbicides, and everything else. So that totally makes sense. How'd you get into this? Like, how did you discover all this? I know when we were in school, I was still the archaic chiropractor, bone out of alignment, pinches nerve, and you were getting into more energy work and stuff like that, like right out, and I was like, man, she's getting weird on me now. So what's like going on there? But now it seems like I'm finally catching up to you and understanding this whole concept of energy. So how did you get into grounding and learning all about it?
The world works in interesting ways. I was actually invited to an autism think tank. So a large percentage of my private practice is children on the autism spectrum. And a lot of them have severe seizure disorders. And in children this sensitive, of course, keeping their nervous system and their spines well adjusted is a huge part, but there's also a lot going on with their digestive tract, with brain inflammation, with seizures. And some of these things are really challenging to treat because these kids are so sensitive. So I was at an autism think tank where a small group of us practitioners who really focus on autism from all different disciplines. We had a cardiologist there. We had a German medical doctor. It was me and a handful of nutritionists. It was just a really interesting group of people. And I had brought up this concept of, one of the biggest challenges I was seeing was helping these kids that were so sensitive with their recurring seizures. Some of these kids were having upwards of, like 100 seizures a day. And this gentleman that was at the think tank says, why don't you earth them? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he started laying out the science, and it was Clint Ober, the founder of Earthing, and the one who's really been the advocate for doing so much research on the Earth connection. And so he just shared a case history that he had of somebody who was having seizures, and they reconnected them to the Earth. And he explained it to me in a way that really made sense. Clint is from the cable television industry. And so what he described is that, the electrical systems of our homes, they're all grounded. There's a grounding rod that goes into the ground, because if it wasn't grounded, we'd get all this static. So we'd have all this static in our TV, we'd have all this static in our stereo. And so our bodies are just the same. Our bodies, we have this electrical system, and we need to ground that electrical system. So when you think of a seizure, in many ways, in its very simplest terms, you can think of it as an electrical system that is kind of just sparking and having a hard time regulating itself. And so it made a lot of common sense to me to say, if we ground the body's electrical system, maybe we can stop some of that misfiring in the brain. And so I took it back to my office. And one of the little girls that I was seeing at the time, I explained it to her mom, and she took it home with her. And at that point, this little girl was having on average 11 seizures per day. And I told her to connect her both at night and also as many hours as she could during the day. And she went from 11 seizures per day to 1 per week. And over the course of period of time, as we did the other things to support her body, she actually became completely seizure free. And so that's what really got my attention, Bill. It was like, wow, that was a hard one to not take notice of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing transformation. Seizures, I mean, that's a scary thing when you never know when that's going to hit your child or somebody that you're around and everything else. And then the secondary injuries that can happen when they're having the seizures and everything else. And, as an adult, how embarrassing that can be for them too. I mean, so yeah, there's definitely a lot of benefit to that as well. What are some of the other health benefits? When we were watching The Grounded, we saw those people up in Alaska and one gentleman hadn't walked in years. One gentleman snored every single night. One gentleman had really bad back pain, couldn't bend over to pick something up, and then flexibility came back. So, what are some of the super cool stuff that you've seen transforming, besides some of the neurological stuff you've been dealing with?
Well, I've seen kind of on several levels. So one, I've seen from a clinical level, so I'll share some of that, but also I participated in some of the earthing research. And so from a research level, it's also really fascinating. So one of the things that's striking about earthing research that I found very different than when you compare it and contrast it to, let's say, even herbal medicines or homeopathic medicines or pharmaceutical medicines, it doesn't matter. Usually, it'll be considered a successful trial if some percentage of people responded. If 20 people are responsive to a treatment, it's like, wow, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. With earthing, what was so striking is that every variable that was measured, 100% of people responded 100% of the time.
Wow.
And so I literally mean that. So for example, in the Zeta Potential study, where the research team was looking at how earthing affected blood flow. And so they were specifically looking at oxygenation of the red blood cell and how red blood cells repelled each other. So when you earth, you can kind of think it like this. When you have a lot of positive charge in your body, your red blood cells start to stick together. They lose their ability to repel each other. So they start getting clumpy, and you end up with blood that's sluggish. And you could think of it kind of, like it starts heading towards ketchup. It starts to get really thick, and then it can't hold oxygen. And so your energy plummets. When you earth, and this is what was amazing, as I was actually able to see as this trial was happening, when an individual touches the earth, immediately, when you watch what happens in their bloodstream, those negative electrons are absorbed by the body. It increases what's called the zeta potential of the cell, which is just a fancy way of saying kind of like their ability, their electrical ability to repel each other. And the red blood cells would go from kind of a flattened shape to perfectly rounded. And when the cell is rounded, it can uptake more oxygen. And the flow of the blood became dramatically thinner and moving much quicker. So it's almost like the blood went from like more thick and soupy to all of a sudden almost like wine, like it just would start to flow. And so when you think about that and the kind of clinical ramifications of that, what we see is that when you earth, immediately, so it's not like something that takes time. Of course, the healing process is going to take time, but immediately when you touch the earth, your flow in your body is going to improve. So your red blood cells are going to be able to flow, your blood is going to flow. And so you're going to get more circulation to your hands, to your feet. So there's some nice research on diabetics and healing some of the ulcerations that are really hard for them to heal. You will see you'll see studies on nerve regeneration. You'll see studies on improved circulation, on an improvement in muscle recovery in athletes. And all of this is due to that enhanced circulation ability. Does that make sense? Am I explaining it okay?
It does make sense. And then, the first thing that it really hits home to me is we talk about the COVID pandemic that's going on right now and the inability, they're still understanding the pathological process of this whole stuff, but the inability of people, even though they can get air in their lungs, for the oxygen to bind to the red blood cell, right? So, it seems to me that speculation, but if we're on lockdown and staying inside all the time and not getting out and getting in touch with the earth, we are actually compounding the problem as far as the disease process is concerned.
Absolutely. You think about what research is consistently showing is vitamin D levels. So we're inside our houses, not absorbing vitamin D.
Yeah.
And we're increasingly even more disconnected from the earth. And we're not moving our bodies, right? So now we've taken our systems and made them even more sluggish. And so for all my patients, if you were going to circle back and say, what would be the two simplest things that you can do to fortify your system to, really strengthen your immunity and have you in the best position if you do face COVID, it's to get your vitamin D levels up and connect to the earth. So that you can really have your body, your inflammatory process. Because the other thing that's interesting in COVID, Bill, is that, and again, we're still learning so much, but it seems like there's an element of clotting disorder and an issue with oxygen uptake. And so earthing can actually help with both of those because it helps to regulate cytokine storms, that kind of over response of the inflammatory and the immune system when it senses an invader. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that's been documented that earthing can help to normalize, is that cytokine storm. So it helps on that front. And it also helps on the front where it's going to keep your red blood cells really as optimally oxygenated as possible.
Yeah.
And so just something so simple that you can do that everyone can do actually for free, which is brilliant.
Yeah. And it's summertime, so there's no excuses why people can't get out and get barefoot and then, get in the sun. It's good for you. A lot of people get scared of the sun because they skin cancer and all this and, don't get burnt, but get out there and get some sun for a half hour, especially first thing in the morning, last thing at night before the sun sets. Those are great times to get some sun.
Absolutely. That's the best time. And earthing is, I think logical kind of flow from that is, okay, so how would I do that? And all you need is direct skin contact with the earth. So you can go barefoot on grass, on sand, like wet sand. Part of the reason why people feel so amazing when you're at the ocean is, number one, you're absorbing the negative ions from the ocean breeze, but you're also earthing your body from that wet sand, and you're barefoot. Most people are barefoot. So wet sand, or even concrete, like unfinished concrete. So, if it doesn't have like a super glossy layer over it, you can get some conducting through unfinished concrete as well. So like what I do when I travel, for example, whenever you go up in an airplane, that differential, the higher you go, the more positively charged your body gets. And so one kind of scary statistic is that your likelihood to have a heart attack or a stroke after flying on an airplane is something crazy like 800% more. It's like this crazy thing. And it makes sense because the more positive your body becomes, the thicker your blood gets. And then you're also sitting still. And so the moment I get off an airplane, I actually, while I'm waiting for my bags, I kick off my shoes and I go stand outside and just stand barefoot. There's not usually grass, but you can find some concrete somewhere.
Yeah.
And you can actually really feel it. When you've gotten really positively charged like that, you can almost immediately feel that kind of flow. So it's best to do barefoot, grass, sand, or unfinished concrete. You can also earth by touching something that is earth. So like if you touch a tree, you'll, be able to get some of the benefits.
Okay.
And those are all the free ways. Those are the ways that you can earth for free outside.
This latest episode of the Evolve Wellness Experience is brought to you by Premier Wellness Centers. You know what makes Premier Wellness Centers really, really unique is we deal with a lot of musculoskeletal issues that come into the practice, but I just kind of had that aha moment the other day, and what makes us different, and that is we use an integrated approach to it, and nobody else really does that. So you could come in with a shoulder problem, and the issue may actually be emanating from some issue in your lower back, and if you just address the shoulder but not the underlying causes or contributors, you don't get the results, and that's what makes us different. So we have a special coming up actually for the month of July at the US 1 East office location, and that is going to be a history, chiropractic, orthopedic, physical, neurological evaluation, x-rays as necessary. Normal cost for that is $264. For the month of July, that's $99. So if you or anybody you know would like to come in and have a comprehensive evaluation, figure out maybe something that you've been dealing with a long time that's holding you back, that's ruining your quality of life, or just something that's nagging and bugging you and you're just sick and tired of dealing with it, give us a call. We have 2 office locations, of course, but at the East office, it's 772-879-8100. That's 772-879-8100. That's Premier Wellness Centers. You said, obviously, that with the research that you've done and everything, immediately you get a benefit the moment you actually touch the ground, and you get this earthing benefit with the electrons. But have they looked into like length of time that's like optimal as far as like, continuing to let those negatively charged particles absorb into your body, or, is that kind of unknown yet?
A lot of it has to do with individual bodies. So what's interesting, just clinically, what I've seen is some people have almost an amazing response to it. Like they touch the earth, and some people, especially people who are really anxious, I work with a lot of people with a lot of anxiety, and they describe it almost feeling like a draining of like the stress from their body. So that's how it feels to them. It's like the moment they touch the earth, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I have people who have chronic arthritis, and within 5 minutes of being connected to the earth, they are able to move their joints and they feel a tremendous difference in pain. Diabetics or people who have impaired nerve function, like I've actually had some people get scared of it because they started sleeping with an earthing product, and I can explain that a little bit to you as well. And during the night, their arm that was previously numb started tingling, and they started feeling all these like pins and needles in their arm, and they thought something was terribly wrong, like they were getting shocked. And what they actually were feeling is like this enhanced blood flow and a little bit of their nerves starting to wake up in this previously deadened area. Mm-hmm. So for some people, it's quite dramatic and fast. Seizures also, I've seen repeatedly respond really quickly. And then other chronic diseases, it's more a factor of you're getting the benefits of the earthing. So we spoke about the increased blood flow, the lowered inflammation. What I'd add to that is it also has a normalizing effect on the hormonal system. So it's been studied relative to cortisol, has a very normalizing effect on cortisol and thyroid function. So those things start happening right away. What your body then has to do is to take advantage of that break, right? So if your body, all of its energy has been going to like creating all this inflammation in your body, then when you quench it, now your body's resources have to go to healing whatever it is, whatever work there is to do. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that takes time. So that's why I often encourage people to not have this expectation of it looking any particular way. The cool thing about earthing is it's so easy and it's free. Or if you use some type of an indoor earthing product, it's like you don't have to do anything to use it. Like I use mine when I sleep, for example. So it's not like this like big effort thing. So to give yourself, at least if you have a really chronic condition, give yourself a full month to really feel what it's doing in your body, so that your body can, use these resources to really do some good healing.
Yeah, I'm already like, definitely, you're starting to like pique my interest on a few different patients that we have in the practice right now. That one gentleman in particular, he's been suffering with, it's very interesting. He clinically presented with neuropathy in both of his hands and both of his feet. Yet when he does not have type 2 diabetes, they're not classifying it. They looked at all his other nutrient levels to see if he has any other type of anemias that might be contributing to this. And we felt it was more of a mechanical issue, and we're resolving that. So now it's almost like, I think, hey, you got to get out and just walk on the beach for like an hour, like every weekend and stuff like that, and get the blood flow going, and like we say, once you restore blood flow to a nerve, then it just takes time for the nerve to regenerate and heal. And that can take months, months and months and months. Right. So,
and it's really not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. That's what I encourage people to do. It's not like earthing is not going to work for you. It's just like, you're not going to go outside and your body's not going to make vitamin D when the sun hits you. Like that's not how our bodies are designed. So our bodies are designed to be connected with earth. So you don't have to worry about screwing up earthing. You're not going to do it wrong. And you're not going to be like the one human on the planet that it's not going to work for.
Yeah.
The question really is, are there other elements? So once you get your inflammation down, once your hormones start to normalize, are there residual, let's say a biomechanical issue? Do you need an adjustment? Mm-hmm. Is there something else going on? Is something going on with your digestion? It kind of helps to clear away the clutter of a lot of things that are in the way, especially in challenging cases, that then you can kind of get to the crux of, what there is to address.
Yeah. Because obviously, as we know, it's a complicated situation for a lot of people. There's multi-systems involved, causal factors involved between nutrition or stress or sleep or whatever the case may be. So, but if you can clear out those energy deficiencies and stuff, and get your energies right and get your all the flow right, then there's nothing standing in your way other than things that you're going to weed out then after that. So you spoke about technologies. Obviously there's circumstances where, people don't get the chance. I personally would love to go to the beach on a regular basis. And although I'm in Florida and I'm on the East Coast, and you think like, well, why don't you? It takes about a 45 minutes to 60 minutes to get out there. And I do work, Monday through Saturday. And, sometimes on the weekend, I'm still unfortunately working a little bit or golfing. So I get that. But to get to the beach, I don't happen. So there's people out there to say, all right, well, in a pinch, when I can't get outside and I don't have time to do that, or I'm in Minnesota and it's 30 below zero outside, I'm clearly not going to be going out and rolling around in the snow. What do I do during those times? Is there technologies or, what do you see and what are the best products out there?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. So if I've learned something about earthing, clinically, it would be that it's consistency over heroic, like huge things, just like weight training,
Right.
It would be better actually to earth for 5 minutes every day as opposed to doing 1 hour on the weekends. And so that's where some of these earthing products just make things a lot more practical. So there's a variety of different places you can get them. Earthing.com was kind of the first place where Clint Ober had his products available, and they have some nice products. I have a colleague of mine who I really love her products. Her domain is Intuition Physician, and she hand makes different earthing products for the bed and things like that, ones that are really great for children, since I work with so many kids. So you can find great earthing products. And in general, the way that they work, because I was like, how would it, I always need to understand like the science behind how something works. So in a nutshell, the way that earthing products work is you always want to think about what earthing really is. If you just want to really break it down, it's a way to exchange electrons. It's a way for your body to absorb negative charge. So if you can't logically trace the path on how that's going to happen, that product's not going to work. Because now the challenge is like, this is becoming a little trendy. And so they're like, oh, you can stick a sticker on your phone and it's going to earth you. Or you can, lay on this mat that's just like laying on your floor and it's going to earth you. None of those things will actually earth you. You need a connection to the ground itself for that electron energy exchange to happen. So here's how it happens indoors. Our electrical system, when you look at an electrical outlet, it has 3 prongs.
Yep.
And the top 2 prongs are electricity. And the bottom prong is actually a ground. And that ground runs through the electrical wiring of your house to a grounding rod that's physically in the ground outside. So when you plug a product that will actually ground you into your outlet, it'll have, usually it just has one little prong that you put into the third, into the ground.
Yeah.
And then you can pull, again, electricity is, it doesn't have any resistance. So you could have a wire 20 miles long and it can pull electrons from that grounding rod up through your electrical system and into your earthing product. And an earthing product has to be conductive. So they're usually made out of silver fibers, out of some type of a conductive carbon, or out of stainless steel. Those are the most common fabrics or compounds that are used. And then it actually does exactly the same thing as you walking barefoot out on the ground. So, and this is something I was able to see with my own eyes, actually being able to measure and see what's happening when we clinically, or from a research perspective, what happens when somebody is actually directly barefoot on the ground, or when you use a product through the ground of your house, it's identical.
Wow.
So, except when you're outside, it's free and you get the sun. So that's why I always tell people, like, if you have the chance to go outside, go outside.
Yeah.
But if it's something, and if you really have a chronic condition and you want to see some real results from earthing, then it's something you want to do every day. And the simplest way to do it is, I encourage people to do it while you sleep, because then you don't have to think about it. So I put like an earthing bedroll along the bottom half of my mattress. It's just a conductive stainless steel panel that's plugged into an outlet that's grounded. And then you just need to have, bare skin contact with that. And then you get 8 hours of earthing every night with 0 effort.
So so when you put that in your bed, your skin is contacting that, or is it under your sheet? Yeah. Or it's...
No, you want to actually be touching it. So again,
okay.
You always want to
makes sense.
You need direct skin contact so that you can get the electrons. So you'll want to have direct skin contact. Some people, like I've had patients who say, oh no, I love to like be totally bundled up when I go to bed, and I wear socks and I wear jammies. And so then I usually recommend to use an earthing band. They make something that, just like a bracelet, or it can be an anklet, and it's made out of stainless steel. It's comfortable. It's like a fabric. It doesn't sound as itchy as it sounds.
I gotcha.
And then that has a stretchy cord, and that can be plugged in. And so that's a kind of an easy, inexpensive way. And that's often how I suggest my patients start. They're like, oh, what should I start with? I think, start with something simple and inexpensive, and it's going to be really easy for you to do. And so I usually suggest just start with an earthing band. They're like really inexpensive. And then you can start to see and feel how it is for you. And then you can always invest in something, bigger and more permanent. But the band is nice because it's also portable. And so like if I'm doing a lot of computer work, like after a while, I start to feel, just kind of like that irritation from working with all these electronics. So I'll put the earthing band on my ankle. And I do find that it really helps to ground my system.
That's great. We're bombarded, obviously, with electromagnetic frequencies and stuff like that, with 5G and all the hoopla that's going on with that. But make no mistake about it, like just even your computers and all the other stuff and the Wi-Fi routers and everything else, it's pretty crazy. So
that was cool. I was a part of I was giving a lecture at a conference and somebody had an EMF meter. And so they were reading the electrical charge and these impacts on the body. And it was cool. We were on stage. It was kind of like unplanned. It was neat how it all worked out. And so there was like an earthing bed demonstration that was right next there. And so they actually kept the meter going so they could see the impact and the change of what happens when you ground your body. And when you touch the earth, whether it's outside or with an earthing product or a grounding product, all of those charges immediately drop to zero. And when you think about why, it makes sense because you've now grounded your electrical system. The reason why a lot of all these extraneous EMFs and 5G and all these things really negatively impact us is because they're interfering with our body's electrical system, with our nerve transmission, with all of these processes that need electricity. So when you ground your electrical system, now you have so much more resiliency to be able to deal with all that crap.
Yeah.
So that's another kind of neat side benefit.
That's amazing. And it's so, like you said, it's so simple in many instances. We talk about the anti-inflammatory benefits, and the blood flow and everything else. I think, is there a similarity or major differences or not even close to the same when the discussion of magnets comes up? Because, a lot of people will, use magnets in knee braces or bracelets like you spoke about, as far as golfing, and it says, it centers them, or it's anti-inflammatory, or it helps with injuries. So can you explain the differences between the two?
Magnet therapy, I know I've had patients who swear by it. They, have really great results. And some people, they don't feel much at all. I think there is some skill in using magnet therapy effectively because we have polarities, right? So we can use a North Pole magnet or a South Pole magnet, and they have different times when they're more useful. So we're working with polarity with magnet therapy. And so that kind of has its own arena. But when we talk about earthing, so magnet therapy works because of the magnetic charge of the earth. When we're talking about earthing, we're talking about the electrical charge of the earth. So it's a very similar concept in that there's this invisible force, right? Whether it's the magnetic force or the electro force. And sometimes we combine them and call it the electromagnetic force of the earth. So we're tapping into the electro portion of that. And the main distinguisher, again, between, let's say, earthing or any of these other therapies, including magnet, is going to be the exchange of electrons. So when you earth, what you're doing is your body is absorbing negative electrons. It's basically absorbing antioxidants. And so all of the great things you read about what antioxidants do for your body can basically be translated over to earthing, because the earth itself is like this giant antioxidant if we touch it.
Wow, that's really, really cool. Obviously, I would assume that there isn't any negative effects per se, obviously, but as the society and world that we live in today, everybody tries to look to the negative. So are there anybody that out there that might want to be careful as it pertains to grounding because of sensitivities they may have, or any other types of side effects with different conditions or things, or at the end of the day, is the earth's the earth and we're born to be on the earth, and there's really nothing that can go wrong?
Well, at its most foundational, I would say that we're all designed to be connected to the earth. But we also, as a society, do a lot of meddling. So the only challenges I've seen have been where we or the medical system has meddled with somebody's physiology. So, for example, earthing has a very powerful effect on blood pressure. It helps to lower and normalize blood pressure. It's immediately effective at being able to thin the blood and help the blood to flow, much more beautifully and easily. So people who are on blood pressure lowering medication, who are on blood thinning medication, when they consistently start earthing, I have had people start to get a little faint and their blood pressure starts to drop a little too low because their need for these medications lessens, but they didn't realize that. So that's the one area that I suggest to people is if you're on either a blood thinning or some type of a blood pressure lowering heart medication, it's good just to check in with your doc and see if your need for those is still what it used to be. Also, some of the hormones, so synthroid for the thyroid, as the body is getting nourished and it's getting what it needs and thyroid function starts to balance out, all of a sudden your need for that medication might have dropped. And so you might start experiencing symptoms of too much synthroid medication, for example.
Your eyeballs start bugging out of your head.
You start doing what?
Your eyeballs start bugging out of your head because you
exactly,
had too much thyroid.
So you want to think about, all the things that could potentially happen as your body gets healthier and all the things you were doing to kind of prop up your body before. Those crutches might not be as necessary. And so you have to revisit those, with the person who put you on. But as far as safety goes, there was actually a formal study done with prenatal infants to look at the lowering of any type of SIDS. And so it was deemed safe to even use with these infants in these situations. So it's a very, very, very safe therapy and something I can feel good about sharing, with your listeners, that something that they can try on for themselves.
And for those listening, if you don't know SIDS, that's sudden infant death syndrome. So SIDS, it's happened. I mean, we have, I think, the highest mortality rate for infants in civilized nations, in the world, the United States. So it's a really, really big deal in the United States. So for the listeners out there, I mean, look, I'm about to run out the door right now and go walk down the street.
Like, I want to get barefoot. Let's get these shoes off.
Let's get these shoes off and get going. So for our listeners that want to, again, get a little bit dive deeper into grounding and earthing, do you have any resources? You spoke about earthing.com. Is there any other books or any other things that you would recommend that they could take a little deeper dive and geek out?
Yeah, I think actually one of the nicest places where no one's going to try to sell you anything, but it's just about learning, is there's a place called earthinginstitute.net, and it summarizes all of the earthing studies. So I think to date, there's been 25 clinical research studies on a wide variety of things. So that's always interesting to learn about. There's been 6 peer-reviewed reviews of earthing effects in the published literature. So you can see those earthing review studies there as well. And then I would say you can also, learn from, there's a handful of movies that are out there. There's a book that was written by Clint Ober entitled Earthing. Those I think are great places to learn a bit more.
Great. And are you actively practicing right now still, or what are you doing these days?
I'm doing a lot of teaching right now. So this phase of life right now, I'm actually working with individuals with body-focused repetitive behaviors like hair pulling, skin picking, nail biting.
Got it.
And so that's really my work in the world right now.
That's amazing. If there's people out there that want to get in touch with you or, somehow contact you or anything else like that, where would they go to do that?
The best way is my new site is coming up. It's simple, drchristy.com, drchristy.com.
Okay. Well, it's great. Well, again, I really, really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Nobody can ever take away the fact that you were the very first guest on the Evolve Wellness Experience. And
it is my honor.
It was amazing to see you and speak to you again. And let's not lose touch for another 20 years. All right. Let's keep in touch going forward for sure.
Fair enough.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.